The great hall of the Red Keep still smelt faintly of smoke and burnt flesh from the last days of battle. Though the fires had been quenched and the broken beams repaired, some lingering presence of blood and flame clung to the stones, as if the keep refused to forget what had happened during the war. Eddard Stark stood upon the raised dais where the throne rose like some spiny beast behind him. The weight of a crown he had never wanted pressed against his temple. No one had asked him what his heart desired, or perhaps they all had, but he had answered with his dutiful silence. Duty was everything to Eddard Stark. Duty brought him to this moment, and duty would keep him there. He had never stood so high above so many men, nor had he ever felt so uneasy at the sight of them bowing before him. The great lords and lesser courtiers bent the knee as he took his seat, face austere, jaw clenched. Each oath of fealty struck him like the blow of a warhammer. This was not the dream he had nurtured in his youth. He had once wanted only to be Lord of Winterfell, and to live in honor and quiet peace, to see the fields and forests of the North thrive, to guide his family, protect them from storms and famine. Yet here he was, the newly crowned king in the aftermath of a rebellion that had upended the Seven Kingdoms. A hush fell over the hall as he settled upon the Iron Throne, though in truth, the black metal of that monstrous seat seemed to loom behind him like a shadow of caution, an eternal warning that no man ever truly owned power. It was an uneasy seat, and it made his back ache as soon as he tried to rest against it. He watched the lords approach in turn to swear their allegiance. Among them were old allies and old enemies alike. Some could not lift their gaze from the floor. Others stared with undisguised curiosity or resentment. But each took his turn, placed his hand upon his heart, or drew a sword to lay at the foot of the dais, and swore before gods or men that they would honor Eddard Stark, first of his name, King of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the first men. He had seen fewer men kneel to the Targaryens after their dragons were long gone than those who bent the knee this day. This was partly out of fear, for Robert Baratheon had led a fierce rebellion, and houses that fought on the losing side recognized the stakes. But Ned knew that some knelt out of reverence for the man he was. He had not led the rebellion as its spearhead. No, that had been his friend Robert. But he had fought fiercely all the same. His reputation for honor was known throughout the Seven Kingdoms, and that name, Stark, was old and revered. The small folk whispered that a Stark had not ruled Westeros for 8,000 years, not since the days when the Kings of Winter held sway only in the north. Those were old legends, half forgotten. This was something new. As the procession of lords concluded, Ned's gray eyes flickered across the throng to where his wife stood. Catelyn, hair still luminous under the torchlight, kept her composure beside her new position as queen consort. Her face showed neither triumph nor glee. Instead, there was a guarded relief. Relief that this long, dreadful war might be at an end, and that they might someday soon return to the quiet roads of life. Her gaze found his. In that single glance, they shared a mutual understanding. This was not a place either of them had wanted, yet they would do their duty, for the sake of the realm and for their children. A subtle stir in the crowd drew Ned's attention. He recognized Stannis Baratheon's stern face among the assembled lords, dark eyes measuring everything, jaw set like granite. His brother Renly hovered behind him with that easy charm, but the boy's face was sullen, a flicker of some emotion too complex to read. Eddard wondered if they doubted him, resented that their family name would not be the royal line. The news of Robert's death had come too abruptly. The king had been grievously wounded in the final storming of the capital, struck by a stray arrow meant for the Mad King's last loyal retainer. None had expected it. Ned had been the first to cradle Robert's head as the life spilled out of him. If not for Robert's final command, perhaps another name might be crowned. But the man's last wish had been that Ned, of all people, continue what they had started. The lords parted and left the great hall eventually, murmuring among themselves about the new age to come. Soft candlelight flickered on the stone walls. A hush enveloped the hall, broken only by the echo of footsteps retreating and the rustle of embroidered cloaks. When all of the formalities ended, Ned slumped forward on that iron seat, feeling more exhausted than he had after the bloodiest of battles. He shut his eyes and let out a slow exhalation. Only then did he realize his cheeks were damp with sweat. Even in the presence of the Red Keep's drafts, the strain of the moment had set his heart to thunder in his chest. He felt a gentle pressure on his shoulder. Caitlin was there, looking up at him. "Ned," she whispered, keeping her voice low so none of the lingering knights and guards would hear. "Let me fetch you a chair more comfortable than this." He managed a small, wry smile and let her help him stand, stepping away from the steel spikes and blades that composed the throne. He could feel the eyes of a dozen guards upon him. One false move, one slip in composure, and rumors would swirl that the newly crowned king was not fit for rule. But that was the farthest thing from Ned's mind. He could only think of the path that stretched before him, and how many pitfalls might lie in wait. They led him to a small seat at the base of the dais, and Caitlin stood behind him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder in a gesture of silent support. In the flickering gloom, he caught a glimpse of Sir Barristan Selmy's kind, but stern expression. The old knight had pledged his sword to the king regardless of the shift in power. Barristan was a man of strict honor, and he would remain Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. Ned felt a pang at the thought. The Kingsguard was an institution that belonged to a line he had helped topple, yet Barristan was loyal to the realm, not to any one man. In time, the hall emptied further. The sun dipped behind the tall windows, and moonlight crept across the floor in a pale slice. It was only then that Ned dared to whisper to Caitlin all the worries that churned in his chest. He spoke of the uncertain alliances and the discontent in the realm. He spoke of winter that always threatened from the north, which no one else seemed to believe might come so soon. He spoke of how ill-fitted he felt to sit on a throne that required cunning and subterfuge and endless politicking. But Caitlin listened calmly, letting him voice his concerns, never once failing him with her compassion. When he finished, she pressed her lips to his temple and whispered, "You have weathered war, dear husband. You shall weather this. You were meant for it, even if you did not choose it." He wanted to tell her that was not so. That he was no politician, merely a man who cherished justice and honor. But the moment was so tender, and he felt so bone-tired, that he simply nodded and let her gentle presence soothe him. After a few more quiet moments, they left the great hall together, flanked by guards who guided them to the royal solar. There, a small table had been set with bread, salt, and wine. They ate in near silence at first, neither wishing to voice the dark cloud of grief that hung over them. The rebellion was won, but Robert was gone. Lyanna was long gone. The Targaryen reign was ended, yet their ghosts lingered in the halls. Ned could almost hear the cries of the Mad King echoing in the stone corridors, see the scorch marks from the wildfire that had erupted before the gates. He thought of Rhaegar Targaryen, and all the regrets and questions that would never be answered. History weighed on him as heavily as the new crown. A gentle knock at the door roused them from their reverie. One of the servants bowed and announced that Grand Maester Pycelle waited outside, eager to speak on matters of state. Ned had no choice but to grant him entry. The maester, stooped and silver-bearded, tottered in with a mountain of parchment, each one an important declaration or a petition that required the king's seal. He began droning at once, "Your Grace, the matters of governance can never wait, especially in such uncertain times. These documents." Ned spared a quick glance at Caitlin, then waved a hand for Pycelle to proceed. His head pounded. The lists were unending. The small council needed new appointments. The treasury was near depletion. The war had drained the coffers. The roads were unsafe. Lords who had supported the Targaryens wondered if they might be stripped of their lands. The Dornish had not submitted wholeheartedly, not when the memory of their fallen prince still festered in their hearts. Storm's End itself was in a precarious state, with Stannis and Renly overshadowed by Ned's ascendancy. Every corner of the realm required a steady hand, and Ned was but one man. The hour grew late as Pycelle's voice quavered on, shifting from one crisis to the next. At last Eddard raised a hand, gently but firmly. "Thank you, Grand Maester. I will see to the signing and reading of these matters soon. For tonight, my queen and I are weary. Tomorrow we shall take up all that must be done. Nem too. Pycelle blinked, uncertain whether he should protest. Then with a rustle of robes he bowed. Your grace is most wise. Of course, we shall reconvene on the morrow. May the gods grant you restful slumber. He retreated with a rustle of parchment that sounded like the flutter of startled birds, and the door closed behind him. Ned rubbed the bridge of his nose, trying to banish the tension that throbbed at his temples. So it begins, he thought. His burdens in Winterfell had been simple, routine, settling minor disputes, ensuring the harvest was brought in, disciplining a foolish vassal if needed. But this was an entirely different game, one that might swallow him if he misstepped. Catelyn took his hand in hers, interlacing their fingers. Let us find a moment's peace, at least tonight. Tomorrow we start anew. He pressed her knuckles to his lips in silence. When dawn came, it was hidden by thick clouds that hovered over King's Landing, threatening to spill rain across the city. Ned rose early. He'd always been a man of early hours, and even as king, he did not intend to lie abed with worry swirling. He drew on a plain tunic, though a fine one embroidered by his wife's ladies, and buckled his sword belt before stepping out onto a small balcony that overlooked the city. In the faint gray light, he could see the labyrinth of streets and the distant glimmer of the Blackwater Rush. Little fires dotted the slums as small folk prepared whatever they could for breakfast. There was a tang of salt from the sea breezes, mingling with the stench of the city. The combination made him miss the crisp air of the north. The memory of Winterfell felt like a dream, but Winterfell was far away. This was his new seat. Reluctant or not, he would rule from here. A discreet knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Jory Castle, a loyal guard and friend, entered and gave a respectful inclination of his head. Your Grace, Ser Barristan requests your presence. The small council has convened. Ned nodded. Thank you, Jory. I'll come at once. He tugged on a heavier cloak, pinned with a simple direwolf sigil. Though he was a king now, he would not adorn himself with lions or stags. He would carry the north with him in all that he did. Perhaps that was the best he could offer the realm. He walked through the corridors, Jory at his side. A few courtiers bowed or curtsied, their whispers of Your Grace echoing behind him. It still felt strange to hear that, as though he were stepping into someone else's story. The steps took him to the council chambers where, at a long table, a handful of faces awaited. Pycelle was there, eyes half-lidded with age. Petyr Baelish, Littlefinger, lounged in a seat, as though he owned the place, a sly smile on his lips. Varys, the master of whisperers, was perched with hands folded. Ser Barristan Selmy stood a bit apart. Ever the knight, his face a polite mask. Stannis Baratheon, jaw clenched, stared at an empty corner as if it had offended him. Renly was absent, which Ned noted but did not comment on. Others of importance filled the chairs or hovered near the walls. Ned nodded to them all in greeting and took his seat at the head. This was the small council, but it seemed anything but small to him, for each face was a labyrinth of motives. The swirl of politics was new to him, and the air crackled with tension. At once they began. Pycelle droned about the treasury. The coffers were deeply in debt. The war was costly, Your Grace, very costly indeed. And the crown's gold reserves are, well, let us say they have seen more prosperous days. Littlefinger chimed in. We can raise funds through careful management of the crown's incomes, and discreet loans if necessary. His voice was smooth, but something in his eyes made Ned uneasy. We'll want to keep the burdens from pressing too heavily on the small folk, of course, lest we cause discontent in the city. Ned frowned. The last thing I want is further suffering for those who already endure so much. Find ways to cut costs. We need no lavish feasts, no golden trifles. The war is over, but let the realm see we are not squandering what little we have. Memdetaben. Baelish smiled thinly. As you wish, Your Grace. I shall handle the details with the Master of Coin's customary care. Ned gave a curt nod. Next, the issue of loyalists came up. Varys leaned forward, hands steepled. Many Targaryen sympathizers yet live, hidden or in exile. They might be plotting. At the same time, There are those in Dorne who hold your rule in question, given what befell Princess Elia. Prince Doran Martell has been quiet thus far, but watchful, one imagines. Ned's stomach tightened at the mention of Elia Martell. The horrors that had befallen her and her children had left a stain on the rebellion, one that Ned had never forgiven. "We shall extend the hand of peace to Dorne," Ned said softly, but firmly. "Whatever happened was grievous, and not my wish. If they feel wronged, I will address it openly. We must ensure no further blood is shed." Stannis Baratheon shifted in his seat, finally speaking. "Words may not be enough for Dorne. They will want justice or retribution for the crime committed against Elia and her children. How will you proceed?" "Now." Ned had no answer prepared, for the thought troubled him deeply. Gregor Clegane was rumored to have committed those atrocities at Tywin Lannister's urging, and Tywin had come to support Robert's claim at the last, sealing the victory. Already, Ned felt the thorns of this crown tangling about him. "Gregor Clegane will be brought to justice," he said in a quiet, resonant voice. "If the man is guilty of these horrors, I will not hide him or shield him, no matter what lord might stand behind him. Let that be known. We shall do right." Silence answered him at first. Then Varys gave a slight bow of his head. "Justice is all any kingdom can hope for, your grace." Yet Ned sensed an undercurrent of tension from those who had grown used to the old ways, where might made right, and alliances were secured by cunning or fear. So be it, Ned thought. If they doubt me, let them see I mean what I say. Talk shifted to matters of port tariffs, roads, and the re-establishment of trade lines disrupted by the war. It was a tedious business, but Ned forced himself to concentrate, scribbling signatures and affixing the royal seal where needed. He recognized that peace was not forged in a single day, but in 100 small decisions that brought stability to everyday life. He would see these tasks through, even if each scroll felt heavier than the last. At the council's end, Barristan Selmy said, "Your Grace, there is one more matter. There remain Targaryen children rumored to live across the narrow sea. Viserys and Daenerys Targaryen. Some lords may press for their elimination, to end the bloodline's claim." He spoke the words carefully, but there was an unspoken question that hung in the air. Would Ned become the sort of king who sanctioned child murder? Ned's voice turned to iron. "No, Denshot, I will not be a butcher, Sir Barristan. If children live beyond the sea, let them. We have enough blood on our hands. I will not extend it across the narrow sea, just to murder innocents. Their father's tyranny does not condemn them to death." End. From the corner of his eye, Ned saw the subtle exchange of glances. This was a break from the old ways, from the typical method of establishing a new dynasty. But he would not budge. They would know him by his mercy, as much as by his sword, if that was possible. A hush settled upon the room, save for a bored tapping of Littlefinger's fingers on the polished table. The matter was dropped without further protest. After the small council disbanded, Ned walked to the royal gardens for a moment of fresh air. The day was gray, but the plants still rustled in a mild breeze, and a few small birds flitted among the hedgerows. He recalled the Godswood in Winterfell. Solemn, ancient, with that sentinel weirwood overseeing the pool. This garden lacked that sacred hush, but it was green all the same, and he took solace where he could. He found himself wishing he could talk to Benjen or his father, men who had guided him in younger days. He wished he could speak to Robert again, to share the burden that Robert had left him. But that time was gone. He was alone in this. Even Catelyn, for all her wisdom, did not share his understanding of the North's perspective in quite the same way. Nor did she fully grasp how foreign the Iron Throne felt to him. She was a lady of the South, accustomed to the ways of courtesy and lords who maneuvered for power. But he loved her, and trusted her more than any, so he would lean on her counsel where he could. Within the garden, he encountered a short man, hair thinning, with a sly twist to his lips, Petyr Baelish. "Littlefinger." The man seemed to appear out of the shadows, standing beside a hedgerow of roses. "Your Grace," he said, inclining his head with a theatrical flourish. "Taking in the garden's wonders, are we? A fine place for contemplation." Ned inclined his head in return, wariness tightening his shoulders. He did not dislike Littlefinger, but he did not trust him. Something about the man's clever eyes put him on edge. I needed a breath of air. "Us, do we all," Littlefinger replied. He took a step closer, and the scent of roses mingled with the faintest smell of damp leaves. "I know you are unaccustomed to the intrigues of court, so I wish to offer my friendly assistance. The crown's finances are a complicated matter. Far easier to let those of us who have a knack for numbers handle them. A king such as yourself need not muddy your hands in the counting house." Ned's brow furrowed. "I will not turn a blind eye to such matters, my lord. I intend to understand everything that passes through the kingdom's coffers." Then Dermal. "Of course," Baelish said smoothly, though a flicker of annoyance crossed his face. "Yet, the realm is large, full of complexities. You may find it beneficial to rely on those who have spent years navigating the labyrinth. I only wish to ease your burden, so that you might focus on the weightier tasks of rule." Ned let out a measured breath. "I will keep your offer in mind. Thank you." He had no patience for Baelish's insinuations, but he managed a curt courtesy. Then he stepped past him, making it clear the conversation was at an end. Littlefinger bowed with a flourish. "As you wish, your grace. My door is always open to you." He left, and Ned felt a fresh wave of uncertainty. Such men thrived on secrets and alliances, using coin as their main weapon. Was Ned prepared to outmaneuver them, or would they slip the reins from his hands? He found his feet leading him deeper into the garden, where, at last, he stopped before a small fountain ringed by pale stone benches. The water tinkled gently. Looking into the water's surface, he saw his own reflection, a face worn by war, eyes heavy with sorrow, lines that had not been there before. The reflection wore a crown of dark hair shot through with silver. He was younger than some might expect of a king, yet he felt older in spirit. Had that single year of rebellion aged him so deeply? He closed his eyes, letting the sound of water calm his mind. The hush of leaves rustling in the breeze reminded him of home. If only the old gods could hear him here. But these trees were not weirwoods. There was no face carved to watch him, and no pool black as midnight. Yet he whispered a silent prayer all the same, asking for the strength and wisdom to keep the realm safe. If any god still listened, he hoped they might take pity. Day by day the castle's routine claimed him. Each dawn, he wrestled with ledgers, petitions, matters of law and trade. He met with counselors, heard the requests of peasants who had traveled far to see their new king. He attended feasts he did not crave and welcomed ambassadors from across the seas. Word spread that King Eddard Stark was a sober and just ruler. Some might say a little too sober, longing for no merriment and showing no taste for indulgence. In truth, Ned found no joy in the pomp. There was too much to do. Too many small decisions that would shape the kingdom for better or worse. The presence of Stannis Baratheon at court was a constant tension. Though Stannis had fought bravely in the rebellion, he now stood overshadowed. Ned worked to ensure Stannis had the respect and position he deserved, giving him Storm's End as his seat, and offering him a place of high regard on the council. Yet, Stannis' eyes always seemed clouded with discontent. Ned wondered if the man felt robbed of destiny, for a Baratheon had toppled the Targaryens, and the realm might have expected a Baratheon king. But Robert's last command had settled that debate. Ned often tried to approach him, to speak plainly, but Stannis was guarded and humorless, nodding only in stiff acceptance of any courtesy Ned offered. A silent friction hung between them. Renly, on the other hand, busied himself with banquets, tournaments, and the pageantry of the court. He was a charming presence, well-liked by many, and he smiled often in Ned's presence, but rarely lingered for serious talks. Ned sensed that beneath Renly's easy grin lay deeper ambitions, but the younger Baratheon was clever enough not to push them. And so the two brothers orbited Ned's rule like distant moons, each handling their own discontent in subtle, separate ways. Meanwhile, news arrived from the Riverlands that the lords once loyal to the Targaryens had accepted Ned's reign without open rebellion. But rumors abounded of secret gatherings, small pockets of discontent that might grow if left unchecked. The Lannisters, too, were a factor. Tywin Lannister had come to King's Landing not long after the dust of war settled, offering nominal fealty. But Ned did not forget what Tywin's men had done during the sack of King's Landing. Nor did Tywin forget that Ned had called for justice. Their interactions were rife with careful courtesy and an undercurrent of enmity. One misstep on either side might light a spark. Catelyn worked tirelessly too, forging alliances through the ladies of the court, appealing to their sense of unity and compassion. She held audiences with noblewomen, arranged charitable efforts in the city, distributing bread and leftover stores from the castle to ease the small folks' hardships. She was beloved by many for her kindness and fairness. Some whispered that the new queen's heart was warmer than her husband's, who seemed cold as a north wind. But Ned knew that was the way of things. He was stern, reticent, weighed by conscience. Better that Catelyn show them the gentle face of House Stark. Between the two of them, perhaps they could steer the realm toward a just peace. Still, every day brought new challenges. The Lords Tyrell, having only half-heartedly supported the Targaryens in the final days, now scrambled to mend the relationship, showering Ned with loyal vows and gifts of gold from Highgarden. They offered great storehouses of grain as well, enough to feed the war-torn countryside. Ned accepted what was offered for the sake of the people, yet he eyed them warily, wary of their motives. Even so, the grain was needed to ease the hunger in parts of the realm struck by famine. The Banners of the Reach had always provided bountiful harvests, and if they were truly loyal now, the realm would benefit. So the game continued. Each day was a delicate dance. Each night a restless vigil in the secrecy of bedchambers, where Ned confided in Catelyn, or sat alone by candlelight, revisiting the same old questions. Am I doing right by them all? Late one evening, Ned found himself in the castle library, seeking a moment of quiet among the dusty tomes. He heard a shuffling of feet and looked up to see Maester Luwin, newly arrived from Winterfell on the king's summons. A wave of warmth washed over Ned at the sight of the familiar face. Maester Luwin, Ned said quietly, with genuine affection. It is good to see you in King's Landing. Luwin bowed his head. Your Grace, I am at your service. Then, as Ned motioned him closer, Luwin's formalities softened. I bring news from Winterfell and the north at large. All remains peaceful, though your brother Benjen is missed dearly. He is now sworn to the Night's Watch, as you know, but we have had no ill tidings from the Wall. Oh. Ned nodded, relieved. That's good to hear. He gestured for Luwin to join him at a table littered with books on the histories of Westeros, old genealogies, and the small matter of field reports from various bailiffs across the realm. By the candlelight, Ned poured them each a cup of wine. Tell me everything. Luwin spoke of small matters, tributes from the mountain clans, a minor quarrel over farmland near the White Knife, the well-being of the peasants in the harsh north. Then he turned the conversation gently to Ned's new station. I must say, Lord, your Grace, rather, this is not the path any of us expected. But I know your heart. You will govern with fairness. That is my hope. But I am learning the ways of the South can be complicated. Indeed, Luwin murmured. Yet you have allies, and your name commands respect. I came here hoping to aid in any capacity. If you wish, I can assist with council matters, help you keep an ear open for rumors. The crown has its own Grand Maester. But sometimes another mind might be of use. Mantreu? Ned appreciated Luwin's sincerity. Thank you. Yes, your help would be welcome. I fear I wade through quicksand at times, each step a peril. Such is the nature of a king's duty, Luwin said with sad resignation. I pray the old gods guide your steps. They continued to speak for a time, and Ned felt a little of the old comfort he'd known in Winterfell. If only for a moment, he could pretend he was simply conferring with his maester about local disputes, not the stability of an entire kingdom. But the illusions passed quickly, replaced by the hush of the library and the distant roar of the city beyond. Still, the night felt a bit less lonely than it had before. Weeks passed in this manner, with Ned juggling the tasks of governance. Now and then, he would think of Robert, remembering his friend's boisterous laughter, his joy in battle, in women, in wine. The city felt emptier without Robert's presence, and at the same time, less volatile. Winter was coming, in the North's parlance, but the realm had an uneasy peace. Perhaps that was all that could be hoped for, so soon after a king was toppled. Late one afternoon, rain pelted the windows of the Red Keep. Ned stood in the great hall, listening to the dripping of water through some crack high in the stones, forming a small puddle on the flags. He had decided to hold an open audience that day for any small folk with grievances. Few dared approach the throne directly, but those who did told of robberies on the roads, heavy taxes from local lords, or villages burned by roving sellswards left over from the war. Ned strove to listen carefully, to promise aid or dispatch men to resolve the troubles. If the kingship meant anything, it should mean protecting the innocent. One man who came before him was ragged, bones nearly visible through skin, with a wife huddled behind him carrying a swaddled babe. They trembled as they approached the dais, wide-eyed with terror, but the man forced himself to speak. He told of how raiders had struck their farm, stealing their goats and leaving the old father of the house beaten. They had walked leagues to reach King's Landing in hope that the new king might grant them justice. Ned felt a tightness in his chest. These people looked at him as if he were their last salvation. "Where did this happen?" he asked gently. "In the Crownlands, near a river fork beyond the hills," the man answered, voice quavering. "We were told." The men wore no sigil, but they boasted of pay from a local lord. We don't know who. Please, your grace, our child is hungry, and we have lost everything." "Mouse." Ned's gaze flicked to a couple of gold-cloaked guards near the hall's side. "Sir Jarek," he addressed one of them, "find these folk a place to rest. Arrange for them to have food and shelter. I will see that men are sent to investigate and bring these raiders to heel. If they serve a lord, that lord will answer." The relief on the man's face was heartbreaking. He clutched Ned's words as if they were a drowning man's rope. "Thank you, your grace," he murmured, tears shining. He nearly collapsed, but the guards helped him and his family away. Ned stared after them, a hollow ache in his chest. So many lives ruined by war, so many broken families. And for what? A crown upon his head. By the old gods, he would do everything to ensure no more tears were shed if he could help it. The open audience continued, each case adding another weight to Ned's conscience. By the end of the day, twilight stretched across the hall, the patter of rain intensifying to a roar outside. Ned rose at last, exhaustion radiating through his bones. As he turned from the dais, he glimpsed Sir Barristan quietly watching him. The old knight's expression was thoughtful, a trace of something like respect in his eyes. "Your grace," Barristan said quietly, "I've stood guard for many kings, but few have shown such care for the small folk as you do." "Someone must," Ned replied. "A king who ignores them is no king at all." Barristan bowed his head. "Truer words have never been spoken, your grace." They left together, and Ned realized that for all his misgivings, he had found at least one man here who seemed to share his sense of honor. Perhaps that was a start. Over time, the Red Keep changed subtly under Ned's rule. The long hanging tapestries that flaunted Targaryen victories were replaced with simpler scenes of the Seven Kingdoms' fields and mountains. The lavish ornaments that Robert had favored were set aside to be melted down or sold, the coin used to secure the city's stores of grain. At feasts, there was less waste. No mountains of uneaten swan or elaborate sugar sculptures. Instead, the small folk were sometimes welcomed in the outer yards, served hot stew on feast nights. These were small gestures, but they did not go unnoticed. Some courtiers grumbled at the plainness of the new regime, but others respected the sincerity behind it. And yet, tension simmered. Some lords muttered that Ned was too soft. Others claimed he was too stern because he insisted on punishing the worst offenders from the war, no matter how powerful their family might be. Rumors circulated that the Lannisters plotted vengeance, or that the Baratheon brothers held grudges. The seeds of potential conflict scattered to every corner. Even within the city, sellswards and outlaws roamed. Ned devoted resources to the city watch, increasing patrols and ensuring the gold cloaks were better trained. But it took time to restore order. There were nights when Ned slipped away from the lavish chambers and found himself on a balcony or in a dark corridor, gazing at the flickering torches below, thinking of how easily a kingdom could descend once more into chaos. He would recall the memory of Robert's battered body, the blood on his lips as he whispered for Ned to take the throne and keep the realm safe. He remembered the grief that seized him then, how he had sworn upon Robert's last breath that he would do right. He had not wished for the crown, but he could not fail his friend in the end. Often Catelyn found him in these moments, pressing her hand gently into his, resting her head on his shoulder. She did not speak meaningless comforts. She simply stood with him, letting him know he was not alone. Her presence was a balm, reminding him that they stood together, a family. Sansa and Robb and little Arya still so young, Bran and baby Rickon, cradled in the nursery. They were the future he had to safeguard. His children would grow up in a realm free from the tyranny of the Mad King. But Ned had to ensure that the tyranny of war did not become a new monster. On one such night, as the moon hung pale above the rooftops of King's Landing, Catelyn quietly took Ned's arm. "I worry for you," she said. "You hardly sleep, and your shoulders are always knotted with tension. Is there no joy you can find in this new life?" He exhaled, feeling the tension in his chest. "Joy is a scarce thing here, Cat. I suppose if I find any, it is with you and the children. They keep me from losing myself entirely." "Then sure." She turned her gaze toward the flicker of distant torchlights in the city. "We shall bring them to court soon. Sansa and Arya, at least. Robb might be better off in the north, learning to rule Winterfell someday, but the girls can learn the ways of the south as well." Ned pictured Sansa's bright-eyed wonder, Arya's fierce independence. How would they fare in this viper's nest of intrigues? Yet Catelyn was right. They could not remain in the north forever, not while he and Catelyn had to be present in the capital. Perhaps seeing them would bring Ned a measure of solace. He placed a hand over Catelyn's. Let us have them come. Perhaps they can bring some laughter to these halls." Catelyn offered a soft smile, and the two stood in companionable silence, listening to the wind. Far below, the city murmured, full of countless souls forging their lives as best they could. Days blurred into weeks, and Ned continued in his kingly duties. The realm was not yet healed, but it was on the path. He saw the first shoots of hope in small acts. Men returned from war to rebuild their farms, merchant ships docking with new wares, houses that once bickered now forging uneasy alliances to avoid further conflict. The realm was tired of war, it seemed, and that tiredness was Ned's ally. He prayed it might hold long enough for him to steady the kingdom on just foundations. In the quiet hours, though, his mind often wandered to questions that would not rest. What had really happened at the Tower of Joy, where he had recovered Lyanna? Why had the Targaryen Prince Rhaegar taken her? Did she go willingly, as some whispered? He tried not to dwell too deeply on those mysteries. He had a kingdom to run, and the secrets of the past were too painful. Still, in the hush before sleep, he would sometimes relive those moments. Lyanna's pale face, her whispered pleas. "Promise me, Ned." The memory haunted him like a ghost. And so the world turned, day after day. Ned dealt with each crisis as it arose, forging fragile truces and dispensing justice. He carried the North in his heart, a stark sense of honor guiding his every choice. The burden of the crown was immense, and perhaps it would eventually crush him, yet still he stood, never wavering from what he believed to be right. If the realm was to thrive, it needed a king who served it, not the other way around. That was the choice Ned made the day he lowered Robert's head to the ground and felt his friend's lifeblood ebb away. That was the vow that kept him on this iron seat of power he despised. And so his rule stretched onward, a quiet storm of resolve in the Red Keep. Winter was still coming. He would be ready, and so would the realm. Because a true king protected his people, no matter what price he paid in sleepless nights and silent regrets. In this new age of a Stark upon the Iron Throne, no one could say precisely what future awaited. But as the sun rose and set over King's Landing, and as the ravens carried messages of new laws and new edicts across the Seven Kingdoms, a subtle shift was felt. There was a gravity to the realm now, a hush that spoke of new beginnings. The lines of power had been redrawn, and Eddard Stark sat at their center, unwavering as the ancient weirwoods of his homeland. If it took a lifetime to bring true peace, he would give it. Even if the crown weighed like a mountain of ice upon his brow, he would bear it faithfully. He would be a king, in truth as well as in name. A king the realm had rarely seen before. A king who kept his promises and who would not forsake the smallest of his people. And if the wolves of winter howled at the edges of his mind, reminding him that darkness would always return, he stood ready to meet it. He was the king in the south now, the king of the seven kingdoms, and Ned Stark would not bend to fear. For in his chest beat the heart of the north, and the memory of those old snows that shaped him. When the final reckoning came, he would be what he had always been, a man of honor, standing firm against the cold. Gah, chow. Outside, sunlight beat down upon King's Landing in a fierce blaze, as though the heat alone might melt the Red Keep's walls. Weeks turned into months, and in that time, King Eddard Stark did everything in his power to honor the promises he had made. To Robert, to the realm, and to the memory of all who had bled in the rebellion. Yet tensions brewed beneath the surface, unspoken but keenly felt. Summer swelter brought no relief from the heaviness that plagued his daily thoughts. One morning, the royal solar was quiet, save for the soft scratch of a quill across parchment. Ned sat at a broad wooden desk, signing missives with the direwolf sigil pressed into hot wax. The smell of melting wax mingled with the scent of dust motes shimmering in the warm sunlight. Caitlin sat across from him, her own quill in hand, addressing letters of introduction for her ladies. Outside the window, the sound of gulls drifting from the harbor reminded them that the sea was near, a far cry from the pine-barked hush of the north. A rap at the door made them both look up. Jory Castle appeared, wearing the colors of the Kingsguard over his armor, a new honor for the man who had served Ned's family so faithfully. Jory glanced from one to the other, then bowed. "Your Grace, my queen, an envoy from Dorne has arrived. Prince Oberyn Martell has come in place of Prince Doran." Ned set down his quill, exchanging a wary look with Caitlin. For months, they had awaited a response from Dorne regarding the atrocity done to Alia Martell and her children. The murder had tainted the rebellion's victory, and in truth, Ned had never ceased to feel shame over it. Now came a man known throughout the realm for his fiery temper. Oberyn Martell, the Red Viper. "Send him to the throne room," Ned said. "I'll see him at once." Caitlin rose, brushing flecks of ink from her fingers. "Should I remain with you?" she asked softly. "Yes," Ned answered. "I need your presence." He hoped that the Queen's grace might temper any hostility that might flare when Oberyn arrived. They left the solar side by side, following Jory through corridors thick with the midday heat. Tapestries swayed in a faint breeze from open windows, but it brought little relief. They entered the great hall. With a silent nod to the herald, Ned ascended the dais and took his place upon the iron throne. Caitlin stood at his right hand. The seat's metal edges pressed against Ned's back like cold, sharp teeth. Though the throne itself was warm from the day's heat, the implied menace never left him. He forced himself to sit straight, eyes on the doors. Guards lined the hall in disciplined rows. The doors opened, and in strode Prince Oberyn Martell, clad not in heavy Dornish silks, but in a light linen tunic of burnt orange and gold. The color accentuated the sun-bronzed tone of his skin. He walked with a surety that bordered on swagger. Beside him was a tall, lean figure in a flowing robe. Likely a companion from Dorne, a close retainer, or perhaps a bodyguard. A hush fell over the hall. Oberyn stopped at the foot of the dais and gazed up at the new king. Ned studied the prince's face, sharp features, eyes brimming with intelligence. But there was also anger there, banked like embers in a pit. "Prince Oberyn Martell," the herald announced in a sonorous voice. "Envoy of House Martell, sent by Prince Doran Martell, Lord of Sunspear." Oberyn inclined his head, not a deep bow, but not insolent either. "Your Grace," he said in a voice that was strong and clear, tinged with an accent that made each word come alive. "I come at my brother's request to treat with you. We received your letters." Ned inclined his head in turn. "We are honored by your presence. It has been too long a silence between us and Dorne." Oberyn's lips curved into a faint smile. "Silence can be a shield, can it not? We had many reasons to remain so. Still, Prince Doran believes it may be time to lay down old grievances, provided we are not expected to forget them entirely. Then see. Ned clasped his hands in his lap, feeling the edges of the throne pressing into his shoulders. I would never ask you to forget, he said quietly. The death of Elia Martell and her children was a grave wrong. My regret and anger over that crime has never diminished. Gregor Clegane and those responsible will answer for it. If justice is not served, there can be no true peace. I offer you my word. The Red Viper's eyes narrowed. Words. We have heard them before. Yet I see the sincerity in your face, Your Grace. You were not the one who gave the order, but your rule is built upon the rebellion that took her life. My brother wonders if you will truly see it through. They must lie. Ned felt a stab of shame. It was no secret that Tywin Lannister had orchestrated the sack of King's Landing. Gregor Clegane had done the deed. Elia Martell and her babes had paid the price of Targaryen loyalty. I intend to see it through, Ned said. Gregor Clegane has been named an outlaw under the crown. Should he be found, he will stand trial for his crimes. Oberyn's brow arched. A trial, or an execution, that depends on the evidence. But I have no doubt that the evidence is damning, Ned replied, voice steady. If House Lannister seeks to shelter him, they will be made to surrender him. If they refuse, it will be taken as an act of rebellion. At that, Oberyn's mouth curled into a small, dangerous smile. I see. In that case, Dorne can find common cause with you. My brother has instructed me to secure an alliance, or, at the very least, a truce. We have no wish to war against the Iron Throne. But we will not stand idle while the murder of Elia goes unpunished. Bart. You have my pledge, Prince Oberyn, Ned said. Then, with measured care, he rose from the throne, descending the dais to stand before the Dornish prince on equal ground. The Kingsguard tensed, but Ned motioned them aside. I once thought a handshake worth more than any parchment. Oberyn's gaze flicked to the outstretched hand. For a heartbeat, tension thrummed in the hall like a bowstring. Then Oberyn took Ned's hand in a firm clasp. Words and gestures, he said softly. Both matter. Let us hope your vow endures. I will remain in King's Landing for a time, to observe the sincerity of your efforts. My brother expects regular reports, of course. Ned nodded. You are welcome here as an honored guest. Accommodations will be provided. Should you have need of anything, I stand ready to assist. Oberyn released his hand, inclining his head again. Then I shall see to it that Dorne does not remain a silent bystander. I thank you, Your Grace. I look forward to further conversation. Then, with that, the Red Viper departed as smoothly as he had entered, footsteps echoing across the marble floor. His companion cast Ned a scrutinizing glance before following. The hush in the hall remained. Ned looked back at Catelyn on the dais, relief flickering across her face. An open confrontation had been avoided. Still, Ned wondered how many knives Oberyn might keep hidden behind that civil exterior. The Martells would be appeased only by true justice, and Ned Stark intended to deliver it, though he knew it would rouse the lion from its den. He returned to the throne, signaled the herald that the day's audiences would proceed. A line of supplicants waited at the hall's far side, merchants complaining of tariffs, small lords with border disputes, and a handful of petitioners from rural parts of the Crown Lands. The routine continued as ever, but the memory of Oberyn's calculating eyes lingered in Ned's mind. If House Lannister resisted, war might ignite again. He prayed the realm was too weary for such a spark, but men had chosen madness over reason before. When the final matter was heard and the audience concluded, Ned descended the throne. The hum of voices in the corridor carried faintly through the great wooden doors. Courtiers gossiping already about Prince Oberyn's arrival, no doubt. Before Ned could depart for some well-earned respite, Varys glided up to him, a subtle figure in soft robes. Your Grace, the Master of Whisperers murmured. A moment of your time? Ned nodded, though the weariness behind his eyes clamored for rest. He followed Varys aside to a small alcove where sunlight fell through a high arched window. Varys folded his hands together. I do not wish to cast a shadow on an otherwise promising day, but I have word that Gregor Clegane may be in the Riverlands. Some say he hunts for bandits, but others claim he and his men are the real bandits, ravaging villages in the name of collecting unpaid taxes. If so, the Lannisters may yet be shielding him under the pretense of some petty cause. Ned's jaw tightened. And the rumors are credible. Alas, many rumors swirl in these uncertain times. But I have enough pieces to suspect it is true. The Riverlands remain unsettled, especially near the mountains. A monstrous man in knight's armor. It does not go unnoticed. Dum? Ned breathed a slow exhale. I will send men to investigate. If it is the mountain, I'll have him arrested and brought to justice. Or else he will die resisting. That, too, would be justice. Varys inclined his head. As you say, Your Grace. Still, I caution you. Do not underestimate Lord Tywin's subtlety. He will not stand idle if his sworn sword is threatened. I know, Ned said. But I won't allow Clegane to roam free, committing atrocities. Let Tywin curse me if he will. Never. Varys' expression was serene. Your Grace is, as ever, most steadfast. Shall I mention this in some subtle way to Prince Oberyn, perhaps? It may reassure him that your words are more than empty promises. Ned paused. It might be wiser to keep it quiet until we know more, lest Oberyn decide to take matters into his own hands. Very well, Varys said with a small, practiced bow. I remain at your disposal. Ned watched the spider retreat, robes rustling like a gentle sigh. With a thought-worn heart, Ned left the hall. The day's burdens pressed on him like armor. He found Catelyn waiting in a corridor, alone. Her arms folded lightly. One look at her face told him she sensed his unease. He beckoned her closer, and she slipped her hand into his. Varys brings word that Gregor Clegane may still roam the Riverlands, he said softly. That beast must be taken. I won't have the realm living in fear of such a criminal. Catelyn drew in a quiet breath. When you move against Clegane, you move against House Lannister. This could bring war. Memnia. Ned's gaze flicked to the open windows, beyond which the city stretched. A sprawl of rooftops shimmering in the heat. Better to face that threat now than let it fester. Justice will not wait. Catelyn placed a hand on his cheek, her fingertips cool against his heated skin. Then do what must be done, Ned. But tread carefully. He nodded, placing his hand over hers. In her eyes he found that steadfast wellspring of courage he clung to. I will, he promised, though the path ahead felt like treading a narrow ledge above a chasm. He escorted her back to their chambers, intending to speak to the small council that very evening. By twilight, Ned stood at the head of the council table, candles casting shadows on the faces gathered around. Stannis Baratheon was there, dour and impassive, arms folded. Littlefinger lounged in a chair, eyes glinting with private amusements. Varys sat with hands steepled. Pycelle was half dozing until Ned called the council to order. Ser Barristan Selmy stood near the door, though he was no longer the sole Kingsguard in attendance. The new recruits, Jory Castle among them, kept quiet watch. Occasionally, the murmuring of guards in the corridor drifted in, an ambient reminder of how the Red Keep never truly slept. Ned cleared his throat. I have received word that Gregor Clegane may be causing havoc in the Riverlands. The Crown has declared him an outlaw for his crimes. I intend to dispatch men to bring him to justice. Stannis' eyes flickered. Have you any proof beyond rumor? I trust Varys' network in this, Ned said. And from the accounts of small folk who have fled to the capital, it seems consistent. The descriptions match the mountain that rides. Nenson Sea. Stannis gave a single curt nod. Then he must be stopped. Littlefinger leaned forward, lips quirking into a half-smile. Noble as your intentions are, Your Grace, you do realize Tywin Lannister may not take kindly to such a move. Gregor Clegane has long been his loyal dog. Dogs bark at their master's command. Ned's jaw tightened. I am aware. Varys' voice was soft. We risk inflaming tensions with the West. House Lannister's resources are considerable. Lord Tywin remains one of the richest lords in the realm. If he sees an attack on Clegane as an attack on himself, Ned lifted a hand to silence Varys. He will see it as such, no matter what illusions we might try to spin. But the man butchered Princess Ilia and her children. He commits crimes still. If I do not act, I betray the very notion of justice. Let Tywin twist it how he will." Sir Barristan spoke with quiet conviction. "Your Grace, you have my sword. The King's Guard stands with you, and we swore an oath to uphold the law." Stannis nodded once more. "I will sail to Dragonstone soon to see to my seat, but if you have need of the royal fleet, say the word. Should war come, best be prepared." Ned's mouth felt dry. "War is the last thing I want." His gaze flicked around the table. "But if forcing Tywin's hand is the price of ending Gregor Clegane's terror, so be it. I will not compromise on that." Littlefinger tapped his fingers on the table. "Then your next step is to choose who leads this expedition. It must be someone you trust implicitly, yes?" Ned considered. He could not go himself, not when the entire realm rested on his presence in the capital. Dispatching a large force might also appear threatening to other houses, stoking the rumor that war was nigh. Better to send a smaller, well-equipped party. He glanced at Sir Barristan, but the man was of advanced age, though still formidable. Then he remembered Sir Brynden Tully, the Blackfish, who had returned to Riverrun after the rebellion. There were also Northerners he trusted, like Roderick Castle, though Roderick had been left in Winterfell. Ultimately, Ned recognized that the Riverlands were closer to Riverrun, and the Tullys were his wife's kin. "I will reach out to Lord Hoster Tully and Sir Brynden to raise a small host," he decided. "They know the region best. My own men from the north can join them. If Clegane is found, they will arrest him in the name of the crown." Pycelle stirred as if waking from a dream. "This is a delicate matter, to be sure. Perhaps a royal pardon might be offered if he—" Ned cut the old man off. "No pardon. No deals. If he surrenders, he will stand trial for murder and treason. If he resists, he will die under the king's justice." Pycelle's mouth flapped for a moment before he subsided. Littlefinger lifted a shoulder in a casual shrug. "Then we are in agreement. I do hope your Tully in-laws can accomplish the deed without burning half the Riverlands. War is so very expensive." Ned resisted the urge to glare at him. "They will handle it carefully." Meeting adjourned. "We all have tasks enough, I'm sure." Chairs scraped the floor as the council disbanded. Varys gave Ned a measured bow, while Littlefinger lingered a moment, as though wanting a private word. But Ned turned away, collecting his papers. The unspoken tension remained as thick as the humid night air outside. He wondered if by tomorrow, rumors would run rampant that the Starks were preparing for war with the Lannisters. So be it, if that was the cost. Outside, the corridor was lit with flickering torches. Catelyn waited at the far end, standing near a stone column. She'd been meeting with her ladies, and had come to see if the council was finished. When she saw Ned's expression, her brow creased with concern. "This is happening, then?" she asked quietly, slipping an arm around his. "Yes," Ned replied, turning them down the hallway. "I only hope it will not plunge the realm into chaos again. But I cannot ignore the truth any longer." Catelyn rested her head briefly against his shoulder as they walked. "You do what is right. I see no other way." They passed under the torchlight, continuing toward their chambers. Each echo of their footsteps reminded Ned that this was a fateful moment. Tywin Lannister had not yet tested the new king. Now, Ned was giving him a cause to do so. He could almost hear Robert's voice. Robert might have roared about how the Lannisters were all serpents, that Tywin was cunning as a fox. But Robert's voice was only a memory. Ned would stand by his own convictions. In the days that followed, ravens flew north to the Eyrie, to Riverrun, to Winterfell. Ned sent instructions for a modest force to assemble under a banner of royal authority. He penned letters to Lord Hoster Tully, requesting that Sir Brynden lead it. The response was swift. The Blackfish welcomed the mission, eager to rid the Riverlands of a menace that had plagued them for too long. Any who followed Gregor would be arrested. No quarter for atrocities. Meanwhile, the atmosphere in King's Landing grew taut, like a bowstring drawn to its limit. Whispers carried through the corridors that Ned Stark's thirst for justice might soon provoke a lion's wrath. Some courtiers eyed the northern men in the castle with apprehension, as though wondering if war parties would soon flood the city. Others continued about their petty intrigues, forging alliances, trading gossip. The Red Keep had always been a nest of vipers. Some things never changed. Ned received a request from Oberyn Martell to speak privately. The appointed time found them in a smaller audience chamber, one often used for private consultations. Oberyn arrived alone, but Ned sensed the presence of the prince's guards not far outside the door, ready to intervene if needed. Oberyn wore a long yellow tunic slashed with red cloth, a style that suited his confident stance. He greeted Ned with a short bow. "Your Grace, I've been told you are taking action against Gregor Clegane." Ned motioned him to take a seat. "Yes. He will be brought to justice if my men can find him." Oberyn's gaze sharpened. "And if your men do not find him?" "Some criminals learn to vanish, especially when they have powerful friends." Ned allowed a small frown to show. "If he disappears, then Lord Tywin may be harboring him. We will press him to produce Clegane or face condemnation from the crown." The prince leaned back, drumming his fingers on the arm of the chair. That condemnation might lead to swords, not word. His dark eyes settled on Ned's face. "I would not mourn the downfall of Tywin Lannister, but I wonder how prepared you are for such a possibility." Ned spoke plainly. "We are as prepared as we can be. I have no wish to plunge the realm into another conflict. But justice is not a commodity to be traded." Oberyn regarded him with an inscrutable expression. Then, slowly, he inclined his head. "You risk much, Your Grace. Perhaps that is admirable. In Dorne, we do not flinch from risk when it comes to avenging our own. It pleases me that you share this sentiment." Ned nodded, though he could not quite match Oberyn's intensity. "I do what must be done." Oberyn stood, crossing the small space between them. "In Dorne, we have a saying. In water, justice. In fire, vengeance. Perhaps your justice will quell the fires of vengeance that burn in my people's hearts." He paused, then added softly, "And if it does not, I will handle it myself." Ned felt the weight of those words, understanding that Oberyn was cautioning him that Dorne might have its own brand of retribution if the crown failed. "I intend not to fail you, Prince Oberyn," he said, "nor your family." The prince bowed in a graceful arc. "I do believe you." With that, he departed, boots clicking on the polished floor, leaving Ned with the hollow sense that a single misstep would unravel all the fragile peace they had built so far. A week later, ravens brought word that Sir Brynden Tully's force had ridden forth, scouring the hills and byways of the Riverlands in search of Gregor Clegane. The scouting parties had engaged small bands of marauders. Some men were captured, confessing under threat of the noose that they served the mountain that rides, and had done so at the behest of a great lord. They would not name Tywin directly. Fear or loyalty kept their tongues pinned. Brynden pressed on, combing every village rumor. Everywhere they went, the small folk emerged from hiding to beg for relief, telling harrowing tales of homes burned and kin slaughtered. The outrages fueled the Tully men, driving them deeper into the lawless pockets where the outlaws hid. Ned waited each day for fresh tidings, tension coiling inside him. He longed to join the search himself, to stand by Brynden's side, but the king could not leave King's Landing so easily. Too many matters demanded his presence. He spent long hours in the solar, reading anxious reports. Meanwhile, the rest of the realm continued its slow progress toward rebuilding. Wheat was harvested in the Reach and shipped to the capital. Storm's End was under the stern eye of Stannis Baratheon, re-establishing its naval strength. The Vale remained quiet under Lysa Arryn's rule, though many said it was Lord Petyr Baelish's influences that shaped the Eyrie more than any. Each region had its intrigues, but with no immediate threat of war, Ned hoped stability might settle in. Catelyn busied herself with ensuring that the children would soon travel from Winterfell. Young Robb, nearly a man grown, was reluctant to leave the north, but it was decided he would remain behind for now, forging bonds with the bannermen who would someday call him Lord of Winterfell. Sansa and Arya, though, were to come. Ned felt a pang of both excitement and dread at the thought. Sansa would flourish in a courtly environment, no doubt, but Arya would chafe under its endless etiquette. Still, he missed them deeply. He wanted them close, especially if trouble brewed with the Lannisters. Amid these concerns, Ned found a small mercy in stolen moments with Catelyn. They would walk in the castle gardens at dusk, or sit in the privacy of their chambers, talking quietly about the future. Sometimes he watched her sleep by the glow of a single candle, and felt a fierce protectiveness welling inside him. He had once hoped to keep her safe in Winterfell, far from the storms of politics. But the storms had come to them anyway. One night, a raven arrived from Sir Brynden. They had cornered Gregor Clegane in a remote stretch of forest near a burned village. The fighting was vicious. Clegane's men fought like devils. But at the last, the mountain had fled deeper into the wilds. Brynden's letter promised they would not relent, and that some of Clegane's lieutenants had been captured. More confessions, more evidence. The net was closing. Ned let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. His chest felt tight. He read the letter again. Would Tywin intervene now that his dog was truly cornered? Or would the mountain slip away to reappear somewhere else? Either outcome troubled him. He found himself pacing before the fireplace. The hour was late, and the rest of the castle slept. Only a few guards posted near the doors glimpsed their king's agitation. A gentle knock came. Ned turned to see Jory Castle, looking hesitant. "Your Grace," Jory said quietly, "I saw the Raven's arrival. Is it news of the mountain?" Ned nodded. Sir Brynden nearly had him. "Not quite." Jory paused. "If you wish, I could ride out and assist. I know the Riverlands well enough from the war." "That in Mesober." Tempting though the offer was, Ned shook his head. "Your place is here with me. Brynden has enough men to handle the search. If Clegane resurfaces or tries to slip into the Crownlands, we'll intercept him." Jory stepped further into the room, voice low. "I recall the night we took King's Landing during the rebellion. I saw what Gregor and the others did. He can't be allowed to go free." Ned's hands curled at his sides. "He won't. We'll see it done." Jory nodded, placing a hand briefly on Ned's shoulder. "Then I'll leave you to rest, Your Grace." When he was gone, Ned gazed at the dying embers in the fireplace. Sleep would not come easily, he knew, not with so many thoughts hammering at his mind. Morning arrived, hot and bright. The day's tasks began once more. Small council, audiences, negotiations with merchant guilds. Ned felt as though each hour lasted a moose turn, weighed down by anxieties. Yet he pressed on, for a king does not shirk his duty. After the midday meal, he decided to walk the ramparts for a moment of fresh air, though the heat outside was stifling. He climbed the stone steps to the top of the walls, a vantage point where the city unfurled below him. The harbor glimmered under the sun. Ships bearing sails from the free cities, from the Reach, from the Stormlands. Along the muddy roads, he saw lines of travelers entering the city. Some were refugees seeking better fortune. Some were merchants laden with goods, and some were knights or hedge knights drawn by the new king's rumored generosity. Far off to the west, the land rolled into distant hills and farmland. Somewhere beyond that horizon, men hunted Gregor Clegane. Footsteps sounded behind him. He turned to see Sir Barristan approaching, hair almost white in the sun, face lined but resolute. "Your Grace," Barristan said, bowing his head. "I thought you might desire company." Ned offered a faint smile. "Always, Sir Barristan. The hours feel long." Barristan stepped beside him, looking out over the city. "I have served many kings, as you know. Some were unworthy. Others were better men. You remind me in some ways of Prince Rhaegar's sense of duty." He paused, perhaps seeing Ned's expression tighten at the name. "Forgive me, Your Grace, if that stirs painful memories." Ned studied the older knight's face. "I did not know Rhaegar well, only that he was said to be noble, and that he died fighting for a cause I considered wrong." Barristan's gaze swept the horizon. "War is rarely so simple as right and wrong. But I speak of your sense of burden. Rhaegar carried one too. He believed he had a destiny to shape. You have the realm's fate in your hands. That is no small thing." A slight breeze stirred Ned's cloak, offering the barest relief from the heat. "I never wanted this destiny, but I will fulfill it as best I can." "Nam Samuel." Barristan nodded. I've come to respect that about you. He hesitated, then changed the subject. I hear that your daughters will soon arrive. Ned found a genuine smile forming. Yes. Sansa and Arya. You must be glad. More than words can say, Ned murmured, thinking of their faces, so different in demeanor, yet equally dear to him. I only hope they do not find themselves entangled in court intrigues. Sansa loves songs of knights and ladies, but real knights and ladies can be less than honorable. Barristan's voice softened. Sansa will learn soon enough that songs and truth are not the same. As for your other daughter, we shall see how she fares. I will keep watch over them both, if you wish it, your grace. Ned laid a hand on the old knight's shoulder. Thank you. I value your protection, Sir Barristan. They stood a while longer, side by side on the ramparts, gazing over the city. For a moment, Ned allowed himself to hope that the realm might truly find peace if men of honor still dwelled within its walls. The peace lasted a fortnight more. Then, one crisp morning, a raven from Riverrun arrived, carrying a brief but explosive message. The mountain had been captured. He was badly wounded in a skirmish with Tully forces, cut down from his horse and taken prisoner. Some of his men had fled. Others were slain. Sir Brynden Tully was bringing the captive to Harrenhal temporarily, intending to deliver him to King's Landing for a formal trial. Ned's heart pounded as he read. Justice was at hand, or at least the first step toward it. Catelyn read over his shoulder, her breath catching. He lives then, after all the horrors? Endor. Ned's mouth set in a grim line. Apparently so. She touched his arm. And Tywin Lannister? Ned folded the parchment. No mention. Sir Brynden says no Lannister banners came to Gregor's aid. Perhaps Tywin has cast him aside, or perhaps he's planning a different move. Catelyn nodded slowly, brows drawn. We must be prepared. Ned took a steadying breath, pushing down a flicker of dread at what Tywin might do once the mountain was brought to face the king's justice. I will summon the small council. We have arrangements to make. And then? Within the hour, the council convened in a flurry of urgency. Ned stood before them, brandishing the Raven's letter. Sir Brynden Tully has captured Gregor Clegane, alive but gravely wounded. He will stand trial here in King's Landing for the murder of Elia Martell and her children. Shock and concern rippled around the table. Littlefinger feigned a light cough. Alive, is he? Well, there's a twist. We rarely see men so vile forced to answer with their tongues still in their heads. If you want a confession, I suppose you'll have it soon enough. Nendereen. Varys spread his hands. Lord Tywin will not stand idle. He may claim the trial is illegitimate, or that the Tullys attacked an anointed knight without royal sanction. Stannis grunted. He was an outlaw, tried in absentia already. Tywin can rant all he likes. Ned looked at each man in turn. The trial will proceed as a royal matter. I will request the High Septon, or one of his representatives, to oversee. The charges are heinous. If Gregor confesses or is proven guilty, the realm will witness his fate. Deism. Pycelle dabbed at his mouth with a trembling hand. Your Grace, have you considered, perhaps it would be more merciful to let him die of his wounds, saving the realm the trouble of a trial? Ned's voice turned cold. I am not in the habit of granting merciful ends to murderers of children. He will face trial, or if the gods judge it, trial by combat if he insists. Either way, his guilt shall be exposed. Pycelle's eyes flickered nervously. Yes, of course, Your Grace. As you say. Mylen? Littlefinger let out a small sigh, fiddling with a quill. We must be sure the city is secure. If Tywin's forces decide to storm in to rescue their sworn sword, Stannis cut in. He would be mad to assault King's Landing. The Crown has the advantage of numbers now. Ned lifted a hand. We will increase the city's defenses regardless. I want the Gold Cloaks trained and vigilant. Summon more men from my loyal lords if needed. This trial will be public. Let all of Westeros see that justice is done. For the sake of Elia Martell and her children. Varys nodded. Prince Oberyn will be most interested to attend. Ned's jaw tightened. He may do so, of course. But I will not have vengeance overshadow justice. If Prince Oberyn tries to kill Gregor in the streets, that helps no one. Stannis gave a curt nod. Agreed. With that, the matter was decided, though the future was far from certain. Ned dismissed the council, taking with him the sense that a storm was about to break. The fate of Gregor Clegane would shape the realm's destiny. If Tywin Lannister opposed the king so openly, war might erupt. If by chance Tywin accepted defeat, it would be a miracle. Ned clung to the possibility that Tywin might prefer preserving House Lannister's fortunes rather than going to war over a known butcher. But men had waged wars for lesser slights. Word spread quickly throughout the city. The mountain had been taken. Street corners buzzed with talk of the trial to come. One day, as Ned moved through the courtyard, he heard a pair of stable boys whisper that they hoped the monstrous knight would lose his head. Servants and lords alike carried the rumor. Meanwhile, Prince Oberyn displayed a composed satisfaction whenever he crossed Ned's path. His eyes gleamed with quiet expectation, as though counting the hours until he could see Gregor's blood spill. Catelyn told Ned that the ladies at court were in a fervor of gossip, imagining all manner of outcomes. Some spun it into a tragic tale of vengeance for Elia Martell. Others saw it as a power play by the Starks to humiliate the Lannisters. The truth was far simpler. Ned wanted justice, nothing more or less. The day dawned overcast, when the news came that Sir Brynden and his captives were nearing the Blackwater Rush, escorted by a strong contingent of Tully men. Ned ordered a formal reception outside the city gates, with gold cloaks lining the roads to ensure safety. He donned his kingly attire, black leathers and a cloak of dark gray, the direwolf sigil prominent at his breast. Catelyn accompanied him, wearing a simple gown of deep blue. She chose no extravagant jewels, as if to remind the realm that this was not a moment of celebration, but of sober reckoning. They rode out together, flanked by the Kingsguard, with hundreds of onlookers pressing against the rope barriers. City folk stared and whispered. Some cheered the king, some simply stood in awe. Beyond the city gates, a broad field led to the main road from the Riverlands. There, Ned waited atop his horse, scanning the horizon. At length, he saw a column of riders approaching, Tully banners snapping in the wind, a leaping trout on a field of red and blue. At their head rode Sir Brynden Tully, known as the Blackfish, his weathered face set in grim determination. With him came a wagon flanked by a dozen armed men. Ned glimpsed a hulking shape slumped within, Gregor Clegane, presumably. The sight sent a chill through him, for the man's sheer size dwarfed those around him, even in apparent injury. The wagon rattled on iron-rimmed wheels, drawing up before the city gates under the watchful gaze of thousands. Sir Brynden swung down from his horse, kneeling briefly before Ned. "Your Grace, I bring you the outlaw Gregor Clegane." Ned dismounted as well and clasped the Blackfish's arm, pulling him upright. "Well met, Sir Brynden. Have you had any trouble on the road?" Ned stammered. "None, beyond a few fools who try to free him at night." Brynden replied. "They met the ends of our spears. He's heavily wounded, but he lives. He curses like a demon, claims you have no right to hold him. That's all the fools said." Ned nodded grimly. "He will have his trial then. Bring him to the Red Keep. Have the maesters tend his wounds enough that he can stand if possible. I want no talk of cruelty or forced confessions." The wagon jolted to a stop, and the guards parted to reveal the mountain chained in heavy irons. Gregor Clegane's face was bruised, half swollen, an ugly bandage wrapped around his torso. His eyes, though, glared with rage and defiance. He spat at the feet of the nearest guard, struggling to rise, but the chains kept him. He wore a ragged surcoat once bearing the sigil of House Clegane, but it was torn and bloodied. Ned approached carefully, the Kingsguard at his flank. The crowd murmured louder, some pointing, others crying out in anger at the sight of the man rumored to have slaughtered innocents. Gregor's one good eye fixed on Ned with a hate that seemed almost inhuman. "Stark," he growled, voice thick with pain. "You think to try me? I serve the rightful lords." Ned's voice was low, controlled. "Save your words for the trial. You will have a chance to speak." Gregor bared teeth in a savage grimace. "Rot in the seven hells." Ned turned aside. Take him to the Red Keep's dungeons. Ensure his injuries do not kill him yet. He stands trial tomorrow." Sir Brynden nodded, gesturing to the men. Gregor was hauled from the wagon, half stumbling, half fighting. Gasps arose from the onlookers at his sheer size. Even half dead, he seemed a giant. A line of gold cloaks formed to escort the prisoner to the castle. Ned exchanged a final word of thanks with Brynden, then beckoned Catelyn to follow as they re-entered the city. The throng parted in uneasy waves, hushed, as though witnessing some rare spectacle. Rain began to spit from the overcast sky, turning the air damp and cool. Ned cast a glance at Catelyn, saw the tension in her jaw. She met his eyes, and there was understanding there. The real battle was just beginning. Gregor Clegane would face the king's justice. Whether it would save the realm from fresh chaos remained to be seen. That evening, Ned convened a final discussion with the small council to prepare for the trial. The High Septon sent a priest to oversee the proceedings. Prince Oberyn, as expected, demanded a front-row seat. He made no secret of his desire to watch Gregor die. Some courtiers whispered that Oberyn might even demand a trial by combat himself, though Ned prayed it would not come to that. He wanted a formal condemnation, not a personal vendetta. But the Law of the Seven permitted trial by combat if the accused so chose, an outcome that threatened to turn the entire affair into a blood spectacle. Still, Ned would not deny him the chance. He had vowed to follow the old codes of justice. Night fell. The Red Keep's towers stood stark against the stormy sky. Ned and Catelyn dined in a subdued atmosphere, though neither had much appetite. Each was lost in thought. At last, Catelyn retired, and Ned lingered by the window, gazing down at the yard where soldiers kept watch. In the dungeons below, the mountain lay chained in the damp, cursing in pain or silence. Above, the storm cloud swallowed the moon. Ned found himself remembering again the day he had last seen Robert alive. The king had taken a mortal wound from a stray arrow, and with his last breath, he had thrust the crown upon Ned's head. "Keep the realm safe," Robert had whispered. The taste of blood on his lips. Ned had tried, was trying still. Yet, the realm might soon slide back into conflict if Tywin Lannister rose in anger. War was not safety. But leaving a monster unpunished was no solution either. In the hall outside, a guard's muffled voice reported the watch shift. Another day was ending. Tomorrow brought the trial. The wind hissed in the eaves. Eddard Stark, king of the Seven Kingdoms, closed his eyes and summoned the old stoic calm he had honed in Winterfell. The die was cast. Honor and duty demanded he see this through, come what may. He placed a hand on the pommel of the sword at his hip. Ice, the ancestral Valyrian steel of House Stark. If Gregor Clegane demanded trial by combat, Ned knew that many men would volunteer to face him. Perhaps the Red Viper himself. Perhaps some champion of the crown. The future teetered on a blade's edge. A single misstep could cut them all. But the kingdom deserved to know that its new king would not flinch from a murderer's wrath, no matter how large or fearsome. Beyond the window, thunder rumbled in the far distance. Rain streaked the glass. The city's fires glimmered like stars scattered below. In that moment, Ned felt the north in his blood, the unyielding cold that had shaped him. Summer storms might rage, but eventually winter would come. He would face it as the man he was, no matter what storms he must brave in the meantime. He turned from the window, the chamber awash in the faint glow of a single lantern. The trial awaited at dawn's call. Another test of the fragile peace in the realm. Another reckoning with the deep scars left by the rebellion. And so the hours slipped away, carrying Ned toward the fate he had never sought, and must now embrace with all the resolve in his soul. Dawn broke over King's Landing in a pale wash of light that seeped through a veil of high clouds. The city stirred with a restless energy, for word had spread like wildfire. Gregor Clegane, the mountain that rides, would stand trial for the murder of Princess Elia Martell and her children. Folk in every district, from Flea Bottom to the Street of Silk, spoke of little else. Some believed the trial a mere formality, that a man with so much blood on his hands deserved no hearing. Others whispered that House Lannister would never permit one of its sworn swords to be condemned so openly. None could be sure how the day would end, yet there was an undercurrent of excitement at the prospect of seeing justice done, or undone, before their very eyes. In the Red Keep, King Eddard Stark had scarcely slept. He had risen before the faintest light, took a small meal of bread and watered wine, and then made his slow way to the throne room. Servants and courtiers were already bustling about like nervous bees, ensuring benches were arranged for lords and ladies who had been granted permission to witness the proceedings. A wooden dais had been constructed at the foot of the steps leading to the Iron Throne. Upon that dais stood 2 large chairs, one for the High Septon's representative, who would officiate the trial in the eyes of the Seven, and another for King Eddard himself, so that he might witness each testimony without looming from atop the iron seat. Ned wished to appear as a man of law, rather than an unreachable figure of monarchy. He wore simple finery in the Stark colors, a doublet of dark gray, embroidered with the direwolf sigil at the chest. A black cloak hung from his shoulders, fastened with a silver wolf's head clasp. Across his back was Ice, the ancestral greatsword of House Stark. He had debated whether to bear it openly, but in the end, he chose to do so. This was a moment of justice, and House Stark's blade might be required should the worst occur. Catelyn joined him in the corridor outside the throne room, dressed in deep blue and white, her face calm but drawn. She offered him a small, sad smile. He took her hands in his, feeling the faint chill of her skin. "You need not sit through this entire ordeal," he told her softly. "It could become ugly." "I am your queen," she murmured. "I will not hide away on a day like this." He pressed his forehead to hers for the space of a single breath. Then they separated. Together, they entered the throne room as the assembled crowd rose to its feet, a hush descending. The lofty pillars and high windows lent a cathedral-like solemnity to the hall. Ser Barristan Selmy and 2 other Kingsguard led the way, their white cloaks flowing behind them. Behind them came lords, ladies, and other notables invited to witness history. An entire section had been set aside for them at the sides of the hall, leaving the central aisle clear. Prince Oberyn Martell waited already, standing near the dais in a garb of gold and red that caught the morning light. His dark eyes followed Ned's every step. Though he inclined his head in respect, there was a tension in his face that suggested he was on the cusp of taking vengeance with his own hands, should the trial prove unsatisfactory. Ned noted that Oberyn had no visible weapons on him, but the man's mere presence was a reminder of the blood feud that spanned houses and kingdoms. Near the dais stood the High Septon's representative, a tall Septon in plain robes of undyed wool. He held a copy of the 7-pointed star, pressed against his chest, lips moving in silent prayer. When Ned approached, the man ended his prayer and bowed. "Your Grace, may the Father and the Warrior guide us this day," he intoned quietly. Ned gave a curt nod. "Let the gods grant justice be done." A murmuring in the hall signaled that all eyes now turned toward the main doors, where a contingent of gold cloaks led by Sir Jory Castle escorted a towering figure in chains. Gregor Clegane was forced forward, half limping, half stumbling under the weight of his own injuries. Fresh bandages peeked out from under a torn surcoat. Even so, he held his head high, glaring at the throng with malevolent fury. The hush that seized the room was absolute. A few gasps escaped from those who had never beheld the man, rumored to be 7 feet tall. The rumor looked near true in the flesh. Jory and 3 other guards muscled Gregor to a place in front of the dais, stopping a few paces from where Ned now sat. The chain between Gregor's wrists clinked against the stone. The Septon raised his voice, carrying through the silent hall. "We gather here under the watchful eyes of the Seven, to judge the guilt or innocence of Gregor Clegane, known as the Mountain that Rides, on charges of murder most foul. Let all with testimony speak truth or be damned by the gods." Gregor's lip curled. His face was gaunt with pain, but he managed a sneer that showed missing teeth. "You're damned if you think you have the right to hold me," he spat, voice booming. "I serve the rightful lords of the realm." A ripple of reaction passed through the onlookers. Ned kept his expression stiff. "You served a butcher's cause," he said, voice quiet but resonant. "You stand accused of murdering Princess Elia Martell and her children. The realm demands an accounting. Deny or confess, which shall it be? Gregor's chest heaved with rancor. I owe the truth to no Starks. His eyes darted to a baron who stood just behind the dais, tension thrumming in every line of his body. Or to you, princeling. You want me dead, I know that. His voice rumbled, echoing off the pillars. Oberyn took a single step forward, fists clenching at his sides. If I wanted you dead without a trial, you'd already be carrion for the crows, dog. Spare us your indignation. His voice dripped with scorn, each syllable carefully measured to hold back the rage behind his words. The Septon rapped his staff on the floor. Silence. The accused shall be heard. Gregor Clegane, do you submit to the king's justice and stand trial as a sworn knight of the realm? Gregor's laughter was a harsh bark that cut through the hush. A sworn knight, he echoed mockingly. He swept his gaze around the chamber. I see no truth here, only enemies. The Starks and the Martells want my head. Well, if you want it, come take it in a fair fight. I demand trial by combat, as is my right under the laws of the Seven. Mendiwatsui. A low roar of shock and excitement rippled through the crowd. Whispers sprang up instantly, their voices swirling in the vaulted space. Trial by combat. The mountain wants blood. Who will stand against him? Prince Oberyn, perhaps? Ned inhaled slowly. He had expected this. Long had the realm recognized a knight's privilege to demand judgment by the gods in single combat. The law was clear. Refusing it would raise questions of fairness, no matter how monstrous the accused might be. He stood, cloak brushing the dais's wooden steps. Gregor Clegane has invoked the ancient right of trial by combat, he announced to the hall. Does any man here stand as champion of the crown to prove the mountain's guilt? Or does Gregor choose his own champion? Gregor bared his teeth in a feral grin. I need no champion. I'll kill any man who stands before me. Prince Oberyn's voice rang out, cutting the tension like a blade. Then I will be that man. He strode forward, ignoring the startled whispers of the assembled lords. I, Oberyn Martell of Dorne, will stand for Elia, my sister, and for her children, who you butchered. Let the gods and the realm witness that I have claimed this right. At once, a storm of voices erupted. Some pleaded for Oberyn to step back, fearful of the mountain's strength. Others welcomed the idea that the Red Viper, famed for his skill and cunning, might at last avenge Elia in direct combat. Ned glanced at Oberyn, seeing the fire in the Dornish prince's eyes. He remembered the man's cold vow to avenge Elia, or die in the attempt. A trickle of dread ran through Ned, for there was always danger in single combat, even for a fighter as renowned as Oberyn Martell. The Septon lifted his hands, commanding silence. Prince Oberyn Martell stands as champion for the crown. The accused stands for himself. Let the gods judge. This trial shall take place in the sight of all. Are both parties prepared? Gregor barked a laugh, hacking as though in pain. I'll show you how prepared I am. Oberyn folded his arms. And I you. Ned forced steel into his voice. Then at midday, the combat shall occur in the courtyard. Let the men see to their arms and armor. Let us pray the gods deliver a just verdict. Should either man yield or die, the matter is settled. One man's guilt or innocence will be proven before the Seven and before this throne. He turned to the Septon, who nodded agreement, and then banged his staff again to dismiss the session. The hall erupted into noise, some crowding forward in shock, others hurrying to spread the news. Gregor was seized by the gold cloaks and half dragged away to be kept under guard until the appointed hour. Oberyn strode out with his retinue of Dornish guards, not bothering to look back. Ned lingered, feeling the weight of his kingship pressing on him like invisible chains. He saw how Oberyn's face had lit with grim purpose. Today, the man planned to kill Gregor with his own hands. If he failed, what then? Catelyn moved to Ned's side, her voice low so that only he could hear. This day will end in blood. If Oberyn falls, Tywin Lannister might use it as a rallying cry, accusing you of letting a prince of Dorne die. If Oberyn wins, House Lannister will never forgive the public execution of their sworn man. Either way, we walk on a razor's edge. Num toi. Ned exhaled slowly. I know. But what choice do we have? The laws are older than any of us. Gregor invoked them, and Oberyn accepted. We must see it through. She laid a hand on his arm, understanding in her eyes. I will stand beside you. Let us hope the gods are merciful. He could only nod. Together, they left the throne room. The smell of sweat and tension seemed to cling to every passage they passed through. It was as though the entire castle had begun to hold its breath, waiting for midday when blades would clash. They retreated briefly to their private chambers. A single meal lay upon the table. Cold meats, bread, a jug of watered wine. But neither Ned nor Catelyn had appetite enough to partake. Instead, they sat in silence by the window, the morning sun climbing in a sky that looked both clear and ominous. Ned found himself remembering battles past. The rush of adrenaline, the closeness of death, the unpredictability of it all. Yet this was different. On the battlefield, one could adapt, shift, fight as a unit. Trial by combat was stark and final. Two men, steel in hand, each convinced that the gods or their skill would spare them. The bells of the Great Sept told the approach of midday. The sound drifted through the open window like a solemn reminder that time was running its course. Ned rose, straightened his cloak, and took up ice from where it leaned by his chair. It's time, he murmured. Catelyn laced her fingers with his before they left. Their steps carried them to the outer courtyard of the Red Keep, a broad expanse surrounded by high walls. On any other day, knights might train there, or servants lead horses from the stables. Today, the space was transformed into a makeshift arena, ringed by onlookers. A wooden platform had been erected for the king and the highborn ladies and lords, offering a clear view of the central field. Along one side, a dais for the Septon, and a small group of watchers from the faith. The crowd pressed close, eyes full of anticipation. Ned ascended the platform with Catelyn, Sir Barristan, and several other Kingsguard. From here, he could see the entire courtyard. The gold cloaks kept a perimeter, halberds forming a living fence. He noticed Oberyn Martell already waiting at one end of the yard, dressed in light armor of lacquered leather plates reinforced with steel. He held a long spear in his hand, slender but menacing, its tip gleaming in the sunlight. A curved dagger hung at his belt. His dark hair was bound back, and despite the tension, a half-smile curved his lips, as though he welcomed the chance to test his mettle at last. Gregor Clegane emerged from the opposite side, escorted by guards until he shoved them away with a growl. He wore battered plate armor, scavenged from what had survived his capture. A fresh bandage showed at his exposed neck, though covered partially by the gorget. His visor was raised for now, revealing a sweat-drenched face contorted in fury. He carried an enormous greatsword, its blade chipped and stained. Yet no one could mistake the man's raw power. Every step seemed a challenge to the ground itself. The Septon, standing between them, lifted his hands for silence. The courtyard fell still, save for the flutter of banners and a light breeze. We come before the Seven in this trial by combat. Let the Father guide us to justice. Let the warrior bless the true cause. If any man yields, the fight is ended. Should one man die, his guilt or innocence is proven. So we swear in the names of the Seven. He turned first to Gregor. Do you, Sir Gregor Clegane, accept these terms, knowing your life is forfeit if you lose? Gregor's rumbling voice carried. Aye. I'll send the Martell bastard to join his sister in the ground. The Septon turned to Oberyn. And do you, Prince Oberyn Martell, accept these terms? Oberyn's smile sharpened. I do. The Septon stepped back, gesturing for them to take positions. Begin then, and may the gods judge rightly. Silence gripped the courtyard like a vise. Gregor lowered his visor with a clang, lifting his massive sword in both hands. Oberyn spun his spear in a fluid arc, stepping lightly across the dirt. Then, with a sudden blur of movement, the mountain charged. Oberyn darted to the side, dancing away from the lethal downswing of Gregor's sword. The blow smashed into the ground, kicking up dust. The Dornish prince circled, spear extended, testing for an opening. Gregor recovered, pivoting with surprising speed, swinging the greatsword in a vicious backhand slash that Oberyn barely sidestepped. The crowd gasped at the near miss. For several heartbeats, the two circled each other. Gregor's breathing was labored, his injuries plainly hampering him. Yet he was still dangerously strong. Oberyn moved like a serpent, lashing forward with the spear whenever he sensed a chance. He scored a glancing hit on Gregor's breastplate, scraping the metal with a shriek of steel. Gregor roared and swung again. This time, Oberyn ducked under the wide arc, thrusting at Gregor's thigh. The spear point bit into a gap in the plate, drawing blood. A collective hiss rose from the audience. Gregor staggered but did not fall. He advanced again, methodical and brutal. Oberyn stayed mobile, jabbing and retreating. Ned watched with a clenched jaw, every muscle in his body taut. He saw the discipline in Oberyn's approach. Aim for Gregor's vulnerabilities, tire him out, let his wounds bleed. Gregor, for his part, sought one decisive blow, though each time Oberyn slipped from his reach, metal rang on metal. Gregor's sword smashed aside the spear tip, forcing Oberyn to step back. Gregor pressed forward, slamming a gauntleted fist at Oberyn's head. The Dornishman ducked, only to have Gregor's knee crash into his midsection. Oberyn doubled over with a cough, and for a moment it seemed the mountain might bring his blade down in a killing stroke. But Oberyn rolled away at the last instant, coming up in a crouch several feet back. A line of blood trickled from his lip where the blow had caught him. Cheers and jeers erupted from the spectators. Some urged Oberyn to finish it. Others marveled at Gregor's relentless might. High above, seagulls circled, as though drawn by the scent of violence. Gregor lifted his visor just enough to spit blood onto the ground. His voice bellowed. "You fight like a coward, Martell. Stand and face me like a man." Oberyn wiped his mouth. "I face you like a man avenging his sister, you filth." He lunged in again, spear whistling. Gregor managed to parry, but his footwork faltered. Oberyn seized the opportunity. A quick slash to Gregor's exposed arm. Another spurt of blood. Gregor howled in pain. A thrill of hope flickered through Ned. Perhaps Oberyn could truly fell this monster. Around the courtyard the watchers pressed closer, rapt. Even the gold cloak seemed enthralled by the spectacle. On the dais, Ned's knuckles whitened around Ice's pommel. Next to him, Catelyn's eyes were wide, her nails digging into the armrest of her seat. One miscalculation, one slip, and it would all end in heartbreak. Oberyn danced backward, fighting high, then low. Gregor reeled, every breath rasping behind his visor. But even wounded, the mountain swung, that great sword in lethal arcs. Twice Oberyn had to fling himself aside to avoid being cleaved in two. Dust and sweat matted both men's hair, and rivulets of blood ran down Gregor's leg from the earlier spear wound. Then, in a sudden flurry, Oberyn pressed forward again. The spear tip flicked out, jabbing at Gregor's armor, seeking soft spots. Gregor roared and swung. Oberyn blocked with the spear's haft. Wood cracked, but held. He sidestepped, bringing the spear around in a wide arc that crashed against Gregor's helmet with a sharp clang. Gregor's head snapped to the side, and he went down to one knee, dazed. A roar of astonishment exploded from the crowd. Oberyn advanced, planting his boot on Gregor's chest to hold him down. He twisted the spear tip into the joint of the plate near Gregor's shoulder, prying for the gap. His voice carried, furious, triumphant. "You raped her! You murdered her! Say her name!" Gregor gurgled, pinned and gasping. He reached with one huge gauntleted hand and managed to seize Oberyn's ankle. Blood ran from his visor. "Go. To hell. Martell." Oberyn shoved harder, searching for the killing thrust. Gregor's grip tightened around Oberyn's ankle. For an instant, Oberyn tried to yank free, but the mountain's enormous strength refused to relent. With a guttural roar, Gregor twisted, wrenching Oberyn off balance. The prince stumbled, losing leverage on the spear. Gregor reared up, tearing the spear from his shoulder in a spray of blood, and flung it aside. Then he grabbed Oberyn by the arm, hauling him close. Gasps of horror rippled through the courtyard. Ned surged half to his feet, heart pounding. Oberyn struggled to break free, but Gregor's hold was iron. The mountain mustered the last of his strength. Headbutting Oberyn so hard, the man reeled back, nearly senseless. Then Gregor raised his gauntlet, ready to smash the Dornish prince's skull into the dirt. At that moment, Oberyn, half blind from the blow, managed to slip his free hand down to the curved dagger at his belt. As Gregor's arm came down, Oberyn thrust upward with every bit of strength he had left, driving the dagger beneath the edge of Gregor's helmet. A wet sound echoed. Gregor's entire body jolted. For one heartbeat, they were locked together like two beasts in a mortal coil. Then Gregor's gauntlet clenched, delivering a savage blow to Oberyn's jaw. Blood burst from the prince's mouth, and he collapsed sideways. But Gregor had taken a mortal wound. His fingers loosened, the blow lacking full force. Oberyn landed in a heap, dazed and battered, but not dead. Gregor groped at the dagger hilt under his helmet, blood running down his neck. He slumped forward onto his face, the massive sword clattering beside him. His body gave a final twitch. The courtyard was silent as death. A single cry rang out from a Dornish guard. "Prince Oberyn!" Oberyn lay on the ground, groaning, chest heaving with ragged breaths. The left side of his face was coated in crimson. His jaw hung at an odd angle, as though broken, but his eyes still flickered open, and he spat a mouthful of blood. I live," he managed in a barely coherent rasp. Shock paralyzed the crowd. Then, the tension shattered. Dozens of voices exploded into sound, some screaming, some cheering. The gold cloaks rushed forward to keep the ring secure. A cluster of Dornish men hurried to Oberyn's side, checking his injuries. On the other side, a pair of maesters ran to Gregor, though by the look of him, he was already gone. The sharpened dagger was buried deep under his jaw, likely piercing up into his skull. Ned finally allowed himself to breathe. The trial was decided. Gregor Clegane was dead, struck down by the man who had sought vengeance for Elia Martell. The courtyard convulsed in an uproar. Some onlookers wept, others called Oberyn's name in exultation. A few kept silent, faces grim, perhaps recognizing what this might mean for House Lannister's stance against the throne. Catelyn's voice was in Ned's ear. "Hey, he did it. Gods be good." She gripped Ned's arm so tightly, her nails bit his flesh. He covered her hand with his, turning to Sir Barristan. "Clear the courtyard," he commanded, voice steady despite his racing heart. "Fetch the best maesters for Prince Oberyn. See that he is cared for." Barristan bowed, hurrying to carry out the orders. The gold cloaks moved into action, ushering the awestruck crowds aside. Ned descended from the platform with Catelyn at his side, forcing his way through the onlookers until he stood near Oberyn. The Dornish prince was propped up by two of his men, his face a ruin on one side. A maester knelt, gingerly examining him. Oberyn's eyes opened, focusing on Ned. His broken jaw made speech almost unintelligible, but he managed a few words. "Hey." "Confess with his dying breath," he tried to say, though it was a garbled mumble. "All know the truth." Ned nodded solemnly, kneeling down beside him. "Justice has been served, Prince Oberyn. But you must rest now. Let the maester help you." He looked at the men supporting Oberyn. "Bring him to the maester's chambers, gently." They nodded, fear and awe mingling on their faces. Carefully, they lifted their prince and began carrying him away. Ned stood, hand braced on his sword hilt, watching them depart. When he turned, he found the still form of Gregor Clegane laid out on the ground, the dagger hilt protruding from beneath his helmet. Blood soaked the earth. The crowd, still thick on the perimeter, stared with raw fascination. This was how a monster died, Ned thought. Not with a grand speech, but with a savage blow in the dust. The final chord of a vendetta that had haunted the realm since the sack of King's Landing. Perhaps now Elias' spirit could rest. Yet a deeper worry nagged him. What would Tywin Lannister do when he learned that his monstrous enforcer had been slain by a Martell's hand, here under Stark justice? He signaled for a few men-at-arms to move Gregor's corpse. "Have him prepared for the pyre," Ned said quietly. "Let no one claim we defiled the body, but let it be known he was lawfully defeated under the eyes of the Seven." The men saluted and moved off to obey, gingerly hoisting the heavy remains. Catelyn's voice drew his attention. We should return inside, she urged, her face pale. Let us see what harm was done to Oberyn. He seemed gravely wounded. Then, it's got worse. Yes, Ned agreed, turning from the scene. The courtyard was still a maelstrom of excitement, with people crowding and jostling, shouting their accounts. As he led Catelyn away, the gold cloaks did their best to keep order. Overhead, gulls and crows circled, drawn by the metallic scent of blood. They made their way into the keep, heartbeats drumming in their ears. Through the corridors, past knots of courtiers who pressed for details, Ned strode on without pausing. His expression was grim, giving no room for idle questions. At last they reached the maester's chambers, where Prince Oberyn had been laid on a pallet. He was conscious, though laboring to breathe, his face contorted with pain. A maester hovered over him, applying a poultice to a shattered cheekbone, stanching the bleeding from his mouth. Oberyn tried to speak when he saw Ned enter, but only a pained grunt emerged. Ned went to stand at his bedside, voice low. Save your strength, Prince Oberyn. You did what you came here to do. Through cracked lips, Oberyn managed a ragged exhalation. He nodded, eyes fluttering closed. One of the Dornish guards standing vigil inclined his head at Ned, gratitude mingling with wariness. He needs rest, Your Grace. The maester says he might live if the jaw can be set and the bleeding stopped. It will be a long recovery. Ned placed a hand gently on Oberyn's forearm, careful not to jar him. Recover, Prince Oberyn. The realm has seen your victory. Oberyn's eyelids fluttered again, and he forced out a garbled whisper. Tell Doran, Elia, avenged. Then he sagged back into unconsciousness, breath rasping. Ned stepped back, beckoning the maester aside. Do all that you can to keep him alive. He is a Prince of Dorne, and we owe him that care. The maester bowed, hurrying back to his patient. Ned caught Catelyn's gaze, saw the swirl of relief and fear in her eyes. He ushered her from the room, leaving Oberyn in capable hands. They walked in silence to their shared solar, passing more courtiers who craned their necks for any scrap of news. Word had spread that Oberyn Martell was the victor, though wounded, and that Gregor Clegane lay dead in the courtyard. The tension in the keep felt charged with possibility. Some looked jubilant, especially those who had prayed for Elias' revenge. Others seemed alarmed, wondering if Tywin Lannister might soon ride against the city. At the solar they found Varys waiting like a patient cat, perched on a bench near the window. When Ned and Catelyn entered, Varys rose with a graceful bow. Your Grace, my queen, he said softly. Events unfold swiftly. I trust that the trial ended as we have heard. Ned's mouth tightened. Yes. Gregor is dead. Oberyn is gravely injured. There can be no doubt in the eyes of the realm. The mountain was judged guilty by the gods themselves. Etium. Varys inclined his head. Indeed. Word will travel fast. Already the city hums with talk. Some say this is the dawn of a new era of justice. Others fear that Lord Tywin will not overlook such a blow. Catelyn sank onto a nearby chair, hands folded in her lap. What does your network tell you, Lord Varys? How will Tywin respond? Varys pursed his lips. I have heard conflicting whispers. Some claim Lord Tywin may renounce all ties to Gregor, branding him a rogue who acted without Lannister consent. Others suggest that Tywin's pride might force him into a show of arms, lest the West appear weak. It is difficult to say which rumor is more credible. Ned glanced out the window, eyes on the sea beyond. We shall prepare for the worst. If he attempts open conflict, we will defend the city. But I pray he sees reason. The law was upheld. Even Tywin Lannister cannot argue that Gregor was innocent. Men have waged war for less, Varys murmured. Still, perhaps you are right. The realm grows weary of conflict, and House Lannister's allies may not favor new bloodshed. The fate of House Martell is now bound to you in gratitude. Or so I would hope. Nyandarishdow. Catelyn lifted her gaze. And if Prince Oberyn succumbs to his wounds, his family may yet claim that the crown did not protect him adequately. Ned felt a pang of worry. Then we will do everything to see him live. I have ordered the maesters to tend him with utmost care. Beyond that, we can only wait. We have done our duty." Varys bowed again. "Yes, Ever, your grace. I shall keep my ears open. May the gods grant us peace after so much strife." With that, the Master of Whisperers slipped from the room, leaving Ned and Catelyn alone. In the hush that followed, Ned sat beside his wife, rubbing his temples. A dull ache throbbed in his skull. The aftermath of tension coiled too tightly for too long. Outside, the sun shone bright, as though mocking the weight of tragedy that still clung to the day. Somewhere in the castle, servants would be scrubbing blood from the courtyard. He imagined the red smear where Gregor had fallen, soon to be just another stain washed away by water and lie. Would that memory also fade so easily? Catelyn placed her hand over his. "You look exhausted." He let out a slow breath, turning his hand to clasp hers. "I feel it, but we must remain vigilant. Today's events might shape the realm for years to come." "You have done what Robert asked," she said softly. "You upheld justice. No one can say you let a monster walk free." His gaze flicked to her face, warm with understanding. He thought of Robert, of the promise he had made, that the realm would be safe under his rule. "Yes," Ned murmured, "but the price might be high. A vengeful lion is not easily tamed." "Matuntabawan. Nor is a viper easily killed," Catelyn replied with a wry attempt at lightness. "Let us hope both these creatures learn to dwell in the same kingdom without devouring it." Ned managed a faint half-smile, though weariness clung to him. A slight rap at the door drew them from their moment of reflection. When it swung open, Ser Barristan stood there, helmet under his arm, his weathered face grave. "Your Grace pardons. The small council has convened at your command to discuss the aftermath of the trial. Shall I escort you?" "Demnan." Ned nodded, rising from his seat. He offered Catelyn a hand, helping her stand. "You needn't come if you wish to rest," he told her. She shook her head. "I will attend. The lords will want to know my stance as queen if there is talk of negotiations with the Lannisters." Together, they left, following Ser Barristan through the corridors. Servants darted aside, bowing low. A hush of deference seemed to follow the king and queen's passage now, for everyone knew the mountain had been slain under their rule. Some cast them looks of awe or apprehension. Perhaps they wondered if Ned's brand of justice would claim other powerful heads in time. In the council chamber, Pycelle sat with quivering jowls, Littlefinger lounged in a chair with a bored expression, and Varys stood near the window as though he had only just arrived. Stannis Baratheon was also present, having stayed a little longer in King's Landing before returning to Dragonstone. The flicker of torches on the walls lit their faces in amber glow. All stood when Ned and Catelyn entered. Ned took his seat at the head, Catelyn to his right. Ser Barristan positioned himself discreetly by the door, arms folded. The atmosphere felt strained, every breath measured. Ned cleared his throat. "We have witnessed Gregor Clegine's trial by combat. He was defeated by Prince Oberyn Martell. The guilt is established, and the sentence carried out. Now we must contend with the consequences. Has there been any word from the west or from Tywin Lannister?" Pycelle dabbed at his forehead with a handkerchief. "No raven has arrived from Casterly Rock, your grace. They have not responded yet." Stannis' brow was furrowed in that perpetual scowl. "Tywin is cunning. He will consider his next move before he issues a response. We should brace for all eventualities." Littlefinger idly twisted a gold coin between his fingers, a half smirk on his lips. "Our coffers are still strained. If Tywin decides to blockade trade routes or raise tariffs on Lannister lands, the crown will feel it. War isn't only fought with swords." Stannis glared. "If he seeks war, we have swords enough." Varys spread his hands in a conciliatory gesture. "War might be avoided if Lord Tywin chooses to distance himself from the Mountain's crimes. He could paint Gregor as a rogue agent, disclaiming him. Perhaps a statement that House Lannister regrets what was done to Elia Martell and her children. The father could save face by placing all blame on the monster's shoulders." Ned leaned back in his chair, exhaling. "If that is his choice, so be it. We will not provoke him further. But if he chooses aggression, we will respond." Littlefinger set the coin down with a clink. I hope your realm's finances will keep pace with your sense of honor, your grace. War is always expensive. Caitlyn's voice cut in quietly. Honor is all we have in the end, my lord. A kingdom built on coin alone falls to whichever purse is heavier. Littlefinger inclined his head in mock deference. Spoken like a true queen. Ned contained his annoyance, looking around the table. Let us be clear. Gregor's death is final. We have complied with the laws of gods and men. Prince Oberyn will recover here, under our care. Until we hear from House Lannister, we proceed with the tasks of governance. If they come to us in peace, we will treat them in peace. If not, Stannis finished the thought grimly. Then we prepare for another storm. A somber silence settled as each man contemplated the notion of renewed conflict. Ned broke it by assigning tasks. Pycelle would handle an official statement to the faith. Varys would monitor any missives from Casterly Rock or the Rock's Bannerman. Stannis, before he returned to Dragonstone, would review the city's naval defenses. Littlefinger, as Master of Coin, was ordered to ensure stable funding for the City Watch and other garrisons. Discreetly, if possible, to avoid provoking talk of war. None seemed particularly pleased, but all agreed. When the meeting ended, Ned rubbed at the tension creeping along his neck. He waited for the others to disperse. Littlefinger sauntered off, flipping that coin in the air. Pycelle hobbled out, complaining of the heat. Only Stannis lingered a moment, arms folded over his broad chest. I fought beside your friend Robert, Stannis said, voice low. He would have been proud to see that monster slain today. The realm owes you a debt, no matter what Tywin says. Ned acknowledged the words with a nod. Thank you, Lord Stannis. I wish Robert were here to see the realm. But this is our burden now. No. Stannis' gaze flickered. Duty. A heavy chain indeed. Without further ceremony he strode from the chamber, leaving Ned and Caitlyn alone. Caitlyn rose, laying a hand on Ned's shoulder. It's done, she said softly. Elia Martell's murder is avenged at last. He nodded, placing his hand over hers. Yes, the crown's justice prevailed. Let us hope we can keep the peace that follows. I won't see the realm torn apart again. She squeezed his shoulder gently. We will face whatever comes together. With that, they left the council chamber, the clack of her shoes and the whisper of his cloak echoing off the vaulted ceilings. Outside, the Red Keep's corridors seemed abuzz with the day's event. Servants and minor lords parted hastily for them, some bowing, others merely gawking in silent awe at the king who had presided over such a momentous trial. Evening arrived, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. From a window overlooking the courtyard, Ned could still see the faint dark stain where Gregor's blood had seeped into the earth. Later, a pyre would be lit. The man's remains would be burned, so none could say the crown had profaned the corpse. Ned wondered if anyone would truly mourn the passing of that monstrous knight. He and Caitlyn walked in the direction of the royal apartments. A cooling breeze swept in from the sea, stirring tapestries in the halls. The day's heat and turmoil had begun to ease, at least within the castle walls, but Ned felt a prickle of unease under his skin, a sensation that the price of this justice had yet to be fully tallied. Tywin Lannister was a man of storied pride, a man who rarely allowed a slight to go unanswered. Could he truly remain silent? They found a moment of solace in the privacy of their chambers, where the windows were thrown wide to catch the sea breeze. Caitlyn set aside her jeweled hairnet, letting her auburn hair fall to her shoulders. Ned removed his cloak and sword belt, resting ice against the wall. For a long while neither spoke. They simply stood beside each other at the window, gazing out over the city rooftops, turning amber in the sunset. Finally, Ned broke the quiet. We should prepare for letters from Sunspear. Doran Martell will want details of his brother's condition. Caitlyn leaned into him. We shall keep no secrets. Let them know a baron fought bravely and won, though at a cost. Maybe Dorne will see this as the rightful end to their family's grievance. Ned nodded thoughtfully. That might be a foundation for lasting peace between the crown and Dorne. With the Targaryens gone, old wounds from the sack of King's Landing can begin to heal. He thought of how Robert had once dismissed Dorne's anger, not realizing how deep that wound ran. But now Ned had witnessed firsthand the intensity of Dornish vengeance, culminating in Oberyn's final dagger thrust. The Martells might at last be appeased. As night settled over the Red Keep, candles were lit in sconces, their glow dancing on the stone walls. Ned and Catelyn took a simple supper of fish stew and bread, too weary for a formal feast. The day's events played through his mind like a half-remembered battle. He had not wielded a blade, yet he felt as if he had fought for every breath. When the meal was done, Catelyn retired to rest. Ned lingered at the table, scanning a map of the 7 kingdoms that lay unrolled before him. His gaze drifted over the western lands, Casterly Rock, the gold mines, the fortress of Harrenhal to the north of it, and the riverlands beyond. He traced the routes an army might take if Tywin Lannister decided on vengeance. Would the West rise in arms? Or would Tywin see no benefit in championing a dead monster? A soft knock at the door made him lift his head. Jory Castle entered, giving a respectful bow. "Your Grace, I've stationed extra men on the walls tonight, in case of unrest. The city is calm thus far, aside from the usual tavern talk." Maynard. Ned folded the map. "Good. Keep them vigilant. If any Lannister outriders approach, I want warning." He studied Jory's face, remembering him as the loyal guard who once served House Stark in the north. "And you, Jory, take rest when you can. These are uncertain times." Jory's mouth twitched in a faint smile. Your Grace, I will." He bowed again and withdrew, leaving Ned alone with his thoughts. For a long time, Ned sat in the flicker of candlelight, mind drifting. The trial was done. Gregor Clegane was dead. King Aerys's final loyal butchers had been purged or brought to heel. Robert's last wish had been to keep the realm safe, and Ned had striven to do so. Yet a sense of foreboding lingered, that intangible feeling that the realm was not finished testing him. Still, he held to the vow he'd made so many times. So long as he drew breath, he would uphold justice and protect the realm. The price was heavy, and winter always loomed in the distance. But duty and honor did not bend. At length he rose from his seat, extinguished the candle, and retired to his bed where Catelyn dozed fitfully. He slipped under the covers, careful not to wake her, and lay staring at the faint ceiling shadows. As sleep slowly claimed him, he found a sliver of solace in knowing that, for one day at least, the dead had been avenged, and the living might find a measure of peace. Morning would come soon enough, with its own demands and new trials. For now, Ned let his weary limbs rest. Heart and mind weighted by the knowledge that every choice he made could shape the destiny of the 7 kingdoms. He did not seek glory or praise, only to do right by all who placed their trust in him. Friend or stranger, highborn or low, that, in the end, was what made him a different kind of king. And the realm would discover whether that difference would hold them in peace or plunge them again into war.